Hi, I'm Joe, and you're listening to Shut Up and Chat with Millie Manders.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Shut Up and Chat. Today I am chatting to my very lovely friend and guitarist and all-round tech extraordinaire, Joe Quigley. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
So Joe and I have been working together on and off really since like 2017, because that's when I first met you at Rebellion as a monitoring engineer, I think.
Stage tech, but kind of doing monitors as well.
Yeah, at the Rebellion introducing stage, and then we got to know each other through some dep work. First it was bass, and then it was guitar, and now Joe has helped write the whole of the second album. But he does a lot more than just being a guitar and songwriter for me. Joe also does all of the putting together of our in-ear equipment and sources the best Wi-Fi and mixing for our phones so that we have good monitoring stuff in our ears. And so Joe is an all-rounder in the music industry. And I'd really like you, Joe, to give us an overview of like, what was your base level? Where did you come into the music industry? What got you into the music industry? Was it guitaring, or was it promoting, or was it sound? And like basically the facets of your career so far and what you are now doing in the music industry.
Yeah, so I've worked in, I've kind of done a little bit of everything in the music industry in a lot of ways. So I mean, I started I started playing in bands when I was like 14. And it was like I just started learning how to play bass. Actually, no, I started learning how to play guitar and doing guitar lessons, and then went along to a friend's band practice just to hang out and like you used to do when you're a teenager. And their bass player just didn't show up, and I was like, well, I'll give it a go. And then I started playing with them, and it was like just playing Green Day covers. And then through that, I met other people, and we ended up forming a proper band and sort of doing all that thing. And when I was growing up, there wasn't, we put on a load of our own shows, like in the drama studio at school. And yeah, like no one else in my band really knew or cared about like anything. They just wanted to play, which is fair enough. But obviously you need some level of PA system. You can't just shout into the crowd. So I sort of set up I learned how to set up a PA and just run vocals through it. And it sounded terrible. We never had monitors or anything like that. But that was kind of my first foray into like the sound stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I got a bit, like, as I got older, I got a bit more serious about playing music, and I've been in varying degrees of touring bands and, local bands and all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout all that, like, I would also, like, sometimes I'd do a bit of promoting. Sometimes I would do a little bit of sound on the side and things like that. And as time's gone on, I've just done a little bit more of all of that, but like on the side. So my background is like career-wise is in marketing and like operations. So I spent 10, 12 years, something like that, working for like massive corporations, and only one of my jobs was ever actually in a music company.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I love that. And my time there was great. And then I went and worked for Ferrero, the chocolate company, and worked for Adobe for a bit, and then some other companies in between. And then when I was sort of approaching my 30th birthday, I was still doing sound on the side, like, just at the weekends, doing monitors at the Underworld or doing a small show out in Reading or whatever. And still promoting a little bit, to be fair, and putting on some club nights and things like that.
So
and
just
then obviously,
to clarify quickly, you never actually studied sound or studied like a degree in music or anything like that. You literally like learn on the fly and built up your knowledge and experience by having to do it yourself as a kid.
Yeah, so like I don't have a degree of any kind. I didn't go to uni. After I did A levels, I went and did a year at Institute of Contemporary Music Performance in London, which it's a great place. I should not have gone. Like, I met some great people, and that was the best thing I got out of it. All the teachers were great. Everything about that place is great. It just wasn't right for me.
Right.
And that was kind of when I realized that like maybe education wasn't for me. So I went straight into work, and I've just learned. I'm a bit of a sponge for information. Like, if I need to know something, I'll just go and learn it.
Right.
Then when I was, over the course of like the better part of 15 years, where I was doing, sound for my own bands, or doing DIY shows. Like I've been in emo bands for years and years and years before joining you. And one of the big things about emo bands is like proper DIY like shows. So like rehearsal rooms and like back rooms of pubs and all that kind of thing. And it was like, they'd always be nuts and like everyone throwing at each other everywhere, but there'd never be a sound guy. Like, one of the bands would have a PA and they'd bring a PA, and you do your own sound, or I would do sound for the headline band, and the headline band, someone from the headline band would do sound for us, or whatever. Right. It was always super DIY. And then just through doing that, I got more and more into it. And then, like I say, when I was then moving through my own corporate career, I then started to get more opportunities doing like slightly bigger venues at the weekends and things like that. And then as I was approaching like my 30th birthday, and I was spending a lot of time at that, that was just after I joined you. And I'd obviously spent sort of 18 months before that depping for you, and spending more and more time using all my holiday to go on the road, and because I loved it and I loved what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then as I was approaching my 30th birthday, I was also approaching the end of my contract at this company that I was at. And it was, it was a fine job. Like, I liked the people I worked with. I could do the job quite well. It's what I'd spent my career doing. And just as I was approaching the end of this contract, and they were talking about, where can we find you a spot? Where can we find you a place? And then we were getting busy as well. And I'd obviously joined you full time at that point. So I was spending, there would be times when I'd be sat answering emails on Zoom calls in the van.
Yeah, I remember that. There were days, there were actually runs of days, sort of full weeks, where we'd be out on the road and we would go and find lunch or have a walk around a town. And you would have to say, I have to sit in the van. And you would be there for like 2-3 hours sometimes, just working every single day. And it was exhausting for you. It was absolutely crushing for you.
Yeah, exactly that. And I was getting, and it wasn't, like I say, it was a fine job. It was a good job, but it wasn't in any way related to what I wanted to do. Like, I'd already started to think like maybe I wanted to be a bit more involved in music, and having the experience of playing with you, I was much more like, yeah, no, this is definitely more what I want to do. And my wife Alex has been self-employed for years now, and sort of said to me one day, like, you're doing all right money wise on the side between Millie and working at venues and doing a bit of sound work on the side. Like, if you had the time to do that, would you not be able to make a living off it? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a great idea. And then like I say, my job at the time was like, oh, we're going to try and find you a permanent position. We're going to, and just the more it came up, the more I was like, I don't think I want it.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
It came to like literally the month before, and my boss at the time basically came on a call and was like, I think we found somewhere. I think we've worked it out. And I was like, I'm really sorry, Steve, but I'm handing in my notice. Like, the end of this contract is the end of my time here. I appreciate it. Really appreciate you finding me something. And it was just before Rebellion, actually, 2022, I think, just before that. And obviously, because I work at Rebellion, it was like a good starting point for my self-employed career. I was like, if I get this, then I've got enough to see me through to the next month.
Yeah.
And then the next month and all that. And so that was kind of when I went, right, now's the time. Do or die kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I just went for it. And then now as time's gone on, I've ended up doing bigger and bigger shows, and like obviously with you, but then also in my sound career, like I do a lot of freelancing for production companies. And I remember starting
talk a little bit about that, because you're not just I don't mean just is inverted commas here. as in it's not the only thing you do. You're not just a sound engineer, you're not just our guitarist, songwriter, tech, you're also crewing for some ridiculously big people right now. So you're doing like a lot of working with sound equipment and crew equipment for some pretty big names in the industry, right?
Yeah, so that's the sort of freelancing I do for production companies. Like, I mean, it's quite funny. I remember starting sort of towards the end of 2022 or the middle of 23 or whatever it was. And I remember going to my first production company and they were like, right, build this rack. Like, I think it was for Stereophonics or someone like that. And it was like, build this rack. Like, here's a diagram of what it needs to look like. You don't need to worry about any of the cable. Just put the things in the rack.
Right.
Like, cool. Yeah, off I go. I know what I'm doing. And I did it. And I spent hours putting all this stuff in the rack. And I was like, right, cool. I'm done. And then someone came over and went, oh, all of these things are wrong. And it was like, it was like, for in-ears and wireless mics and stuff, you have units that have different ranges.
Right, okay.
And I put completely the wrong range for every single one. And it was just, so I had to take it all out and do it all again. And that seems like such a silly thing to me now, but like, that's not even that long ago. Like, I think that was in 2023. I think that was like mid 2023. And I look back on that now and like, like even today there was a new freelancer that started in the warehouse I was in, and even not the new freelancers, some of the full-time staff as well are like, oh, Joe, I need help with this thing. Like,
right.
I've become much more the other side of it. And it's like I say, it's a lot of it is just because I'm a sponge and I'm not afraid to say, oh, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not afraid to sort of go, I don't know how to do this. Can someone walk me through it? But if I get shown once, then I remember.
Yeah. That's kind of a theme that's come up with you being my third chat now. It's kind of a theme that's come up throughout this, that when you're in the music industry, if you don't know something or you can't do something, just be honest, because actually everybody in the music industry has probably had to waffle their way through something at some point, and someone is going to know and be kind enough to help you out.
Yeah, honestly, like the most frustrating thing is like turning up to a venue or turning up to a job or anything like that, and it's like, okay, we need to do this, and it's like, and someone being like, okay, yeah, cool, and then I don't mind if you do it wrong, like that's fine, like, because we all start somewhere, we all learn, like,
sure.
I still make mistakes. Some of the people that I know that work with the biggest artists in the world, they still make mistakes and shit happens.
Yeah.
But then, learning from those mistakes is the important bit. It's the frustrating thing when people sort of sit there and go, no, I know I'm right. And I'm like, you're not. And they're like, no, I am. And then I go, well, hang on a minute, it's not working, so you're clearly not.
Yeah.
So let's fix it.
Yeah.
And I've got so much more time when someone just goes like, I mean, I remember us turning up to a venue with our in-ear rack once, and the engineer was quite new, and like I think maybe uni.
Who you're talking about,
and like they were just so like honest about it. They were like, I was like, here's how it works, blah blah blah, blah. And they went, oh, okay. And I was like, do you need me to walk you through it? And they were like, is that all right? And I was like, yeah, of course it is. Like, absolutely fine. But then, there's other times we've turned up to places and people take it and do it, and then they do it wrong, and then I have to go and undo it. And it's like, it's so much easier. Like, I
also remember vividly one of the venues we went into where there was a person doing sound, and you saying, is that okay? Do you know what you're doing? Yes, I know what I'm doing. 20 minutes later, you're like, this should have been done by now. Yeah. Do you know what you're doing? And they're like, no, actually, I don't. So why didn't you say that in the first place? Because this is now 20 minutes behind schedule, because you couldn't just say to me, I don't know what you're talking about. And that would have made a world of difference.
That's exactly it. And like, that's one of the things I've learned so much about like doing the bigger shows and stuff. Like, that 20 minutes for a show of ours is like, for the most part, it is whatever. Like, we'll make it up. It might mean that we have to eat after the show rather than before the show, or like have a snack or whatever. It might be when we're a bit rushed, and you know, it's always workable. But when you're
Yeah,
at like arena level, like that doesn't
yeah.
work like that. You know, you
20
can't
minutes
push
is way too
doors.
long. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
you can't push doors at an arena. Like
Yeah,
you got to get everything runs to a tight schedule. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned, and I think that's one of the things that served me really well in my career is that I've always been willing to learn,
yeah,
and once I learn, and I'm never gatekeepy either. Like if someone doesn't know how to do something, I'll help show them how to do it.
yeah,
And I
because it's
think
not about belittling people either, or being like, well, I know everything.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
sure.
it's not even that. And it's like, you know, if someone asks me a question, I'll always try and take the time to explain it. And so many people did that for me when I was starting, which is
Mm,
why I think I try and pay that forward a little bit.
mm.
Because like I say, I mean, I remember 2 years ago when did it completely wrong, and then now I'm sort of like I get a call being like, "Hey, we've got this really complicated prep. Are you able to make the time to come in?" Sort of thing.
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, like, and it's also like, you know, relationships and all that, like having good relationships with people, like you form that by not just by being good at your job, but also showing that you're a decent person for
Yeah,
that industry.
absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
One
yeah,
rule
I
of the
think that's the
music
other thing.
industry is don't be a dick.
Yeah, exactly that.
Another common theme, but also, you know, that whole relationship thing, that's how you've ended up working places, right? Is by having good relationships, not just with people that are above you, but with people that are on your level, people who are starting out um, behind you or whatever. And then people offer you opportunities because they can see that not only do you want to learn, you want to be good at your job, but you're also respectful to other people. And that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that's a big part of how we ended up working together. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we saw each other once a year at Rebellion pretty much, and then would maybe occasionally comment on something on Instagram or whatever. It was,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't really until we started working together that we became friends.
Yeah.
You know, it was, but you know, I knew you and you knew me, and so when it came up, when this stuff came up, and it was like, hey, I need a depth.
Yeah.
It was just like we already knew that we liked each other well enough to work together, and
Yeah.
it was, you know, that's half the battle, right?
100%. Yeah. Having a cool, calm collective in a van is very helpful.
I
So
can almost imagine the thing that you're talking about with that as well.
yeah, I don't know what you mean, Joe. I don't know what you mean. So I'm going to do a bit of a reveal now. There'll be a lot of people that are either listening or watching right now that don't know that, Joe, you have a hearing impairment.
Yeah.
And Joe wears some very nice, very high spec hearing aids when working, be that on stage or doing sound tech or whatever. Joe, how old were you when you started to lose your hearing?
That's a good question. It's a bit of a difficult one, to be fair, because I probably should have had hearing aids a lot earlier than I did.
Right.
And I think a large part of why I would put it off for so long was because I was worried about what that would look like for being a musician, for working in sound, all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I must also say that I am fortunate in a way that my hearing loss isn't damage. It's loss, not damage. So mine is, I do have a little bit of hearing damage, but I think everyone in a band has a little bit. But basically my hearing is sort of, if you looked at like the frequency curve of my hearing,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty much the same as everyone else's, just quieter.
Right. Okay.
My hearing loss is genetic hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely nothing I could do about it. And I think that was one of the big things that I put off, because I was really worried that they were going to say, yeah, you've got hearing damage because you didn't wear earplugs when you were younger.
Right. Okay.
So I put it off for a long, long time. I think I was 20, no, yeah, maybe 24, 25, something like that when I
Yeah.
got hearing aids. And it was largely out of spite. Someone said to me, "Oh, I won't." I will go and do this thing if you go and get your ears tested. And because I was feeling belligerent, I went, fine. And I went and got my ears tested. And as soon as they said to me, like, oh, it's genetic, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, it is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
my dad wears hearing aids. Like, my aunt wears hearing aids. One of my uncles definitely should wear hearing aids.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's a genetic thing on my side, on my dad's side of the family, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And once I knew that, it was like, you know, no use crying over spilled milk sort of thing.
Right.
Like,
was there any anxiety over it though? Because I mean, obviously, you get so many stigmas around anybody, any kind of disability, right? There's so many stigmas. The society is definitely not caught up to the idea that just because you have a disability doesn't make you enable, right? So
yeah.
Was there any anxiety around that as well, of like, if people find out that I've got this degradation of my hearing, or what if it gets so quiet that I'm not going to be able to do my job? Was there any of those kind of like thoughts and feelings that might have gone on at the time?
Not at the time. I think that came a bit later. Like, once I transitioned into like full-time sound, like when I was about 30, that's when I started to get a little bit of that, because I was a bit more, at that point, I was a bit more like, are people going to judge me for this? Are people going to think I can't do my job? And like, I felt the need to like preface it by saying, you know, I wear hearing aids, but you know, I can still do my job. And I
Right.
can, you know, I'm a, you know, I don't wear them when I'm mixing bands, because because they do color the sound, obviously, because they're microphones that pick up, you know.
Right. Okay.
You know,
wearing hearing aids could actually do more harm than good in terms of getting good sound in a room, basically.
I mean, I feel like that. I mean, I'm sure that there's other people in the industry that would say differently. But the way that I feel, because you know, the way my hearing loss works, or certainly the way that I perceive it to work,
yeah,
which is that once things are above a certain volume, like, I can just hear them.
right.
Like,
okay.
and obviously that depends on room and environment and all that kind of thing. But like, you know, when I'm at a gig, you know, I'm not sat there sort of going, oh, well, I have a little dip in my hearing at like sort of 1.6K or something like that. I'm not sitting there thinking, oh yeah, I'm missing the things that are in this frequency range.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, you know, I'm just enjoying the band.
Right.
And I've always done it. I've always taken my hearing aids out for gigs and for like when I'm at a gig and things like that.
And is it the same when you're on stage with us? Do you take your hearing aids out in order to have your in-ears?
Yeah. So I have my in-ears in, and you know, as a result of my hearing loss, I probably have my in-ears louder than any of the rest of you do.
Right.
But, you know, again, like, I mean, I probably have my pack at like 50-60% most of the time.
Right.
Which I don't think is that dissimilar to the rest of you. And like, that's kind of what I mean by like, once it gets to a certain, it's almost like a compressor actually, or a gate, sorry. Like, once it gets to a certain point, it kind of feels like it just kind of
just is suddenly there.
Yeah.
Like switching on a TV almost, like it's not, and then bang, you've got the sound.
Yeah, exactly. So my hearing aids mostly help me when it's in like conversational, like,
okay,
areas. Like, even when I play guitar at home, to be honest, like when I'm playing like my acoustic or whatever, normally I'll take my hearing aids out, just so that I can sort of feel it a little bit more, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely do think there is a little bit of stigma in, like, when I say that you know, I've had people sort of say to me before, like, oh, well, you know, even if you're hearing it quieter, surely that means that you're like
not as competent or whatever.
Yeah, but
I was going to ask you, like, has anybody been like disrespectful or ignorant around your hearing loss?
I don't think disrespectful. I don't really think there's a bit of ignorance, but I don't think it's like malicious ignorance. I think it's a genuine lack of understanding. I think people hear like hearing aids and they just assume like, oh, you're deaf. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's different types. Like, I know sound engineers that are like, should definitely wear hearing aids, but it's from years and years of like cymbals being blasted at them and like Marshall stacks being blasted at them. And it's like, and that is like so much more damaging because like you lose different frequencies and things like that. And it's like, I have them all just a bit quieter.
Right.
So like, you know, and there are things that I do to like sort of mitigate that a little bit with like with the tech that I have available and things like that, like, you know, utilizing some of the, like, if I'm like, you know, I'm when it comes to being at a mixing desk, I would consider myself more a monitor engineer than a front of house engineer. So I'm the one on stage, like interacting with the band. And, you know, part of that is standing at a monitor with a microphone and basically turning up frequencies until it feeds back to try and cut out the feedback. So that when a vocalist inevitably points their mic at the monitor by accident, it doesn't immediately scream at them.
Right. Okay.
And there's a science to that. Like, you know, I've heard people before sort of say like, oh, you know, you need the ear for it and that. And it's like, you don't, because if I turn up 6K on my desk and it screams at me, I know that that's a feedback point. Like, you know, and I know the science behind how it works. So
yeah,
that's how I do it. I approach it very mathematically and that kind of thing. And then and I think I approach monitors quite mathematically because it's like, it's about the band, and actually mathematically is probably the wrong word, but I approach it quite personally because monitors are such a personal thing, and that's a big part of why we have our system where we can all mix our own monitors, because, you know, one person saying, oh, can I have a little bit more kick? Your little bit and my little bit are probably very different.
Vastly different, yes.
So
my little bit of kick is almost non-existent. Your little bit of kick is a punch in your face.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you know, like it's such a different thing. So I work on it very personally, and
sure.
You know, your role as a monitor engineer is to make the band feel comfortable and to make sure that they have the best tools available to do their job. So that's the way I approach it. I approach it very scientifically and very personally from the two different sides of it. And then, you know, when it comes to front of house, I work a lot more on feeling than I do on, you know, obviously, like, I want to make things sound good.
Yeah.
But when it comes to volume, like, I don't necessarily approach it like, ah, yes, this sounds at a good level. I'm like, this feels like it's crushing my skull. This is too loud.
Right.
Like, you know, I can really feel that kick drum punching me in the gut. Like, that's great. I'm really happy about that. But oh my God, that, like, the overall mix is making me feel like I want to claw my ears off. Like, and that's not so much volume, that's like the pressure of the noise and that kind of thing. So that's how I approach it.
That's quite an emotive response to that, though, isn't it? Like, that really is a big response to a sound level. I get it, though, because like when we had mixing engineers and stuff working for us, rather than us being able to do our own monitors or not having staff there, there's definitely been elements of that at certain shows. So I completely get that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I think until people sort of interact with me doing the job, and actually I think the biggest sort of ping pong in a little bit, I think one of the biggest times where I've ever felt it negatively affect me in any way is actually when I was like my old hearing aids broke a little while ago, and it took me just to get new ones, and I was just putting it off and off and off, not for any particular reason, just other shit going on. And then people were getting frustrated with me because, you know, they'd be like, Joe, and I'd be like, you know, just not responsive. And like, I think that was more frustrating. I think that's the thing that's frustrated people, where I've like not like owned it myself a little bit.
Right.
Like for a little while where I was like, oh, I actually don't feel too bad not wearing my hearing aids. But actually, to everyone around me, I was like, talking to a brick wall, like, you know.
Or
and
even, I mean, from our own experience in the band, certainly when there's 4 of us on the stage plus a sound engineer, possibly somebody else, I don't know, a show rep or something, and everybody needs something from you. So you've said it yourself before as well, like if there's overwhelm and there's lots of people talking, you kind of shut yourself down.
Yeah.
So if you've also not got your hearing aids in and you've got loads of people that need something from you, of course, like it then becomes a bit like, Joe, I don't know what kind of dog whistle volume I need to get to, but I need to speak to you.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And like I definitely experienced it, and like some of my sort of work situations where I think people were getting quite frustrated because they would be experiencing like that frustration with me.
Sure.
And I think that's been more detrimental than actually my hearing loss. Like, because you know, and especially with monitors and things like that, like so many people are using in-ear monitors these days, and it's like then, and when I'm mixing monitors, like I've got in-ears in anyway, so it's like it's like I'm so that I'm more in tune with what they're experiencing.
Right.
So yeah.
If I'm hoping that there'll be a whole bunch of people that will want to watch or listen to this, and that a contingency of those people might be hearing impaired, who want to get into the music industry, love the music industry, and whatever facet that looks like, whether it's live sound or crewing or being on stage or whatever. And we know there's myriad different types of every disability. So hearing impairment is going to be on a wide spectrum. But what kind of advice could you give to somebody who might be sitting there going, I really want to do this, but I'm so scared, or I don't know how to approach it?
I think the first thing I would say is like be honest with yourself about how it does limit you in yourself. Like I say, so like, you know, for me, when I'm not wearing my hearing aids, actually working on a site, an active site, like where we're putting up like 50 speakers at once, like, and there's people shouting everywhere and things like that. Like me not wearing my hearing aids in that situation is actually really detrimental to me, because it gets me stressed, and it gets like people around me stressed and things like that. So like I know that I really need to, like, that was one of the things that made me go like, right, I need to go get new hearing aids. Like,
yeah,
like, because this is stressful for everyone involved. So I think being honest with yourself in that kind of respect of like what your own limitations are and how you can mitigate it, I think is the best way I would probably put it. Like, but also understanding like there are different roles within this industry. Like, I mean, even myself, like when I first got self-employed, I was like, I am going to be a front of house engineer and a monitor engineer. And then actually I do very little of that these days, because you know, I had a really quiet time, and I went, I'm gonna, and my wife actually introduced me to the idea of going and doing like some general crewing, and so that meant working at like Wembley, O2, Ali Pali, Roundhouse, Royal Albert Hall, all these massive like iconic venues, and it was just doing grunt work. Like, you know, it was pushing around cases, it was, you know, coiling cables, taping things down, all that kind of thing. But it really opened up my eyes to the fact that there are so many roles within this industry.
Yeah.
Like that range from pushing around a fight case and like coiling cables and taping things down, to then like when you're on like that kind of big show, like you have dedicated people that put up all the like the big speaker stacks that fly up in the air, and you'll have two of them on a show, on like a Wembley show, and then on a stadium show you might have six of them. You know, so you know, that is a role that exists, and then you know, and then there's front of house and monitors and things like that, and you know, like I say, like I do very little of that these days, but it, you know, that is kind of where everyone always wants to go. But then there is also the other side of it as well, which is like tour managing and production managing and all that kind of thing, where it's like, you know, not necessarily sound related, but there is an element to it. Like,
sure,
there's people that, again, those big systems
in there. Joe does actually do some of the tour management stuff for me now as well, because it was a one-man show for a very long time, and I started to get incredibly stressed with the amount of stuff that I was having to do on a daily basis. So Joe does actually take over some of those things within our bubble of a business. So yeah, he's well experienced in talking to promoters and getting the tech specs sorted for me, and routing and van hire and things like that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I think there are so many facets of it that like it's very easy, especially I think I have quite, my hearing loss is quite bad, like, but like I say, because it's genetic, it's like I still have that frequency curve.
Sure.
I do know of some people who have kind of had to step away from doing front of house and monitors and all that kind of thing because they have got damage from other things that's made it very difficult for them to do that job,
right,
to the level that they would like to do it. And the people that I know that that's happened to have stepped away from it because they're like, I am not happy with the product that I am producing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Again, that's an honesty thing, isn't it? I'm no longer up to the ability to give that standard that I would want to receive.
Yeah, exactly that. And that kind of feeds into what I was saying to before about like understanding like yourself and understanding how it affects you personally. Like, you know, I definitely don't think that there should ever be anyone basically going, oh, basically, you know, don't listen to the people that are going, you can't do this because you're hearing, you've got a hearing loss. Like, yeah, no, it's not about them, it's about you. Like, if you don't feel that that's a thing that you can do, but then you're going, well, there's nothing else I can do. There absolutely is.
Sure.
But, you know, when you get up to the sort of like not even stadium levels, like, you know, you get up to like even our level where we're starting to take out crew, like that crew grows, and then you go up to the next level and it grows again a little bit more, and there's so many more people involved. Like, you know, a friend of mine at the moment is out with a band as a monitor tech, not as a monitor engineer. So you've got the monitor engineer who's at the desk, and then the monitor tech is there to make sure all the batteries are changed and all the in-ear packs, all the labeling's done, everyone gets the right packs, all the mics are cleaned and like ready to go. You know, they fix, like, if there's a problem, they're the ones on stage fixing it, all that kind of thing. And that's like immediately adjacent to the band. So it's like, you know, these things exist, and there are so many roles within this industry that I think so many people don't understand, that like open up so many more doors. That I think, you know, so many people think if I'm not at a desk, I'm not in the sound world,
or if I'm not on stage, I'm not in the music industry, or whatever. But the music industry is like any other business, isn't it? It's got so many different types of things that you could be doing, and you can still be absolutely close to the music as well, right? No matter what job role that you end up with in the music industry, you can still be super close to the actual music itself and to the touring industry and everything else.
Exactly that. And like, even, you know, and then like even beyond that, there's things like promoting and things like that, where it's like, you know, just wanting to like bring up bands and put on bands and have a great night and things like that. And I've known people that's gone from putting on shows in the back of a pub to then putting on shows at like Kentish Town Forum and things like that. Like, you know, it can grow exponentially. And I think that's I think my big thing is that, like, for every one thing you feel like you can't do, there'll be another 10 things that you can. Like,
and actually, I think that's a really lovely statement to kind of leave this chat on, is that for everything that you can't do, there's another 10 things that you possibly could do. I love that, and I have loved listening to your entire journey and the amount of things that you've done. And I love the fact that you're, just as a person in general, you're incredibly positive to work with. And even when you're super stressed, you're never so stressed that you lose your kindness and your focus and your ability to be positive. And that's one of the things I love most about working with you. So thank you so much for spending time with me, Joe.
Absolutely.
And through that.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'll see you this week for Manchester Punk Festival.
Very excited.
By the time you're listening to this, listeners or watchers, Manchester Punk Festival would have been done, but there we go. We've got hindsight. I'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon.